Excellent for tuning in. Today I'm going to look at the Sennheiser wireless lav mic system, the AVX system. As you may know, Sennheiser has different products on the market. I think the most widely known is the analog system. I show you the model number here. And then they released a couple of years back the AVX system, and recently they also have like a budget digital system. So that's something, if you're in the market for a lav mic system, you may want to consider analog, premium digital, or the budget digital, because those are all different systems. They have some benefits and disadvantages. And today, because my YouTube channel is growing so nicely, I wanted to reward myself with the Sennheiser AVX system to not only get a better sound, but also to improve my workflow, because this system has a little bit of a unique aspect to it when comparing it with my current system. So this is my current system. I am using this Saramonic for a long time right now. And it's not a bad system, as you can see. It has a good sound. It's an analog system. It's a dual channel system. That's why I initially got that. But more to that later. The main difference between the system that I'm currently using and because I want to switch to the AVX is this system that I have right now. While it makes a nice sound and while it's more budget friendly and has also quite a decent build quality, a good price value, when I move my head around, as you may know in my unboxings, sometimes I'm standing in front of the camera and have this top-down shot, and then I unbox something or I have something in my hands. I'm also moving my head. But every time, if I, for example, speak straight into the camera, or if I'm moving my head down, it can affect the volume. So that's actually if you're making a certain quantity of videos, let's say you're making videos every week, then you will start spending more and more time editing your footage. And the audio track with this system, I have louder parts and I have parts that are more quieter. And that's actually very inconvenient, because then you have to cut the video, adjust the volume, and that's a little bit cumbersome. And from my research, the Sennheiser AVX system, from what I've been told, has an excellent automatic gain control function. Something that's I really want to try, because if it saves me time, that's totally worth making the sound improvement, the faster workflow improvement, and also the interference protection. Because as my understanding, this is because it's a digital system, it switches around easily. While as with the analog system that I'm using right now, I mean, recently I don't had any interference or signal issues, but initially I sometimes did have some interference or signal issues. Right now it works fine, but that's also something you want to keep in mind. Are you using an analog, a digital? Digital systems also can introduce a certain degree of latency. The AVX is pretty fast, but let me show you here. Just analog system, I think it works just straight immediate. But as soon as you look for different digital systems, you may also want to pay attention to the latency, that the latency is not that big, because obviously if you're talking to that microphone, the signal has to be digitized, transmitted over here, and then converted back into analog so that it can go into your camera. And these processes, depending on your system, may be faster or take a little bit more time. So I think the safest is analog, but more and more people are switching to digital, because it also has the advantages that I told you just a second ago. And yes, this is really quite a step up. If you remember that I just started out with the Canon EOS M, which has the APS-C size sensor. It becomes a little bit dated, but it's still a nice vlogging camera for occasional use. And I started out with a wired mic. So that's also a purchase consideration. You don't necessarily need to start right away with an expensive system like the Sennheiser. Those are really, really pricey. Made in German, the BMW of lav mics. You can also start with something cheap. So it's always, you find the right proportion for your particular use scenario. For me personally, I really learned how to speak into the camera with this wired mic. Quickly discovered when I move around, it's really cumbersome. Then I think I got a Boya system, which the Boya system also worked very nicely, but The build quality was not that terrific, and it was also only a single channel. And then I thought, oh, let's try a dual channel that's a little bit more high quality. And that's when I tried the Saramonic. But as I told you, the Saramonic worked great for me for several years. But now, since the channel has grown to over 6,000 subscribers, I thought, what the heck, just make the investment and reward yourself for the work that you have put in. And now we're going to test the Sennheiser AVX. I'm going to do an unboxing in part 2, and then in part 3, maybe I go outside, shoot some test audio in different situations. You're going to hear some A/B testing between the Saramonic, the wired Audio Technica, and then this. We just make some sound comparisons, and then in part 4, I'm going to give you my final conclusion, what I think about the system, whether that's worth it or not. So awesome for tuning in. Let's get rolling. Terrific. Now I'm very excited to have a closer look at the AVX system. One thing you also notice, it has an XLR receiver that if you wanted to, you could plug this, for example, in your external USB sound card, external sound card or mixer. I'm going to use it with my DSLR. I think that's what it's made best for. But obviously these systems are quite versatile, so you can imagine different ways of using them. And yeah, I mean, one main reason is the Chinese system that I'm using right now. While the build quality is okay, I think the German system has a little bit more obsession with detail. Like I told you earlier, I think it's like the BMW of microphones. And some people have criticized, if you're using a system like that, that you can't use normal AA batteries, but you are stuck with these Sennheiser lithium ion battery packs. As you can see, the accessories are quite generous. You have everything you need, adapter cables, the transmitter, very compact receiver, USB charging cable, and a quick close-up look at the receiver unit reveals how compact this system really is. So that's also one main selling point. The build quality is really nice and it's compact. If, for example, you're a little bit more ambitious, then you know working with an external recorder at some point is definitely a consideration, and having a compact receiver unit is definitely a plus. And as you can see, that's a proprietary design, so you're stuck to the Sennheiser system, but I don't mind that. The batteries, they're not cheap, but they're also not super expensive. So if you're using this commercially, or you're like a pro user, or just a little bit more ambitious. I mean, I saw other big YouTubers that are using this system. They don't notice, they don't say it, but I notice it just by the pin that they're wearing on their lapel mic. So let me quickly get the other parts out here as well, and then we can jump to the sound test. Like I told you, there are different microphones that you can get with the system. I just opted for the cheaper one. So if you're a really crazy YouTuber with 100,000 subscribers, by all means, go ahead, get the other microphone. That's even more expensive, but for me, that was a little bit overkill. I just went with the standard ME2. And from the research that I did, this I think is a little bit more omnidirectional. It picks up a little bit more from the surrounding versus this other one that's more expensive. It's a little bit more thinner, it's more compact, something that you, for example, could place on an actor, but it was considerably more expensive here in Germany, and I actually thought it would be pretty good if I capture a little bit more of the surroundings. If I do an unboxing, obviously you want to hear a little bit. So it's not poorly focused on my voice, but also picks up some sounds from the surrounding. So it's not a totally closed mic, but a little bit open as well. USB charger, okay, some power plug adapter, and then the transmitter unit. Again, very nice compact design. Should be an awesome system. I really like the feel of it. Maybe if you're working on a movie set, you could put it in a charging dock. I think they have a charging dock for that as well. And here again, super compact unit, and this proprietary Sennheiser battery. That might be a little bit more expensive. I have to double check this, but for me, totally worth it. I'm going to test the system right now, and then I'm going to be back in a second. Now we jumped to the test part of this microphone system. You're still listening to the Saramonic system, the analog system, connected to my old Canon APS-C size Canon EOS M. And one thing I also want to point out, if you have a microphone system, regardless which microphone system, it also can have an effect what camera you're connecting this to. For example, this Canon EOS R has a pretty good microphone or sound input. It gives you a little bit more richer sound and more low end, versus I know if I connected the sound system to my Canon EOS M, that tends to be a little bit thinner. So don't always just judge it by the first sound. The microphone system, depending on your camera, can also, if you have a little bit more pricier camera, that also can benefit the sound. And what I immediately noticed with the Sennheiser AVX is that it has a higher output power than my old Saramonic system. As you can see here, with the Saramonic system, I had to drive the preamp in the camera significantly more, and with the Sennheiser I could dial this down a little bit, and that's what you want. You don't want to drive the preamp in your camera a lot. You want to dial this down a little bit, and you see that's the signal that's coming in. So it's nice and strong. So let's switch over to the Sennheiser AVX. And now we have a perfect listening comparison. It's also a little bit tricky. First I recorded with this small camera, and now this is the old system, old camera, old microphone. And now you're listening to the Sennheiser AVX, the new wireless lav mic system with my Canon EOS R. And yeah, I mean, this should sound nicer. Again, just to summarize why I got so interested in this Sennheiser AVX system. Point number one is to reduce the strain on me in editing with having these louder parts and these quieter parts. If I speak a little bit louder or quieter, or if I move my head around, with the Saramonic system, it just had one signal, and that means I had louder and silenter parts. With the AVX, it should do some dynamic signal processing and maybe compress the sound a little bit. That should be very nice, and I hope this will really help me, which I'm going to tell you in the conclusion part. And then the second point, with the Saramonic, I had a little bit of echoiness, which you wouldn't notice if you watch the footage on computer or on your desktop speakers. But as soon as you put on the headphones, you would hear some slight echoiness, and that's perfectly normal. But it had to do with the room acoustics, and I hope also that the Sennheiser is going to perform nicer with this, because I can really nicely dial in the sensitivity. And then obviously if you work with an open microphone, where the microphone is very sensitive, you can pick up more room acoustics. And you work with a closed mic that has a lower sensitivity, then you don't pick up as much on the room acoustics. And I hope that's what the AVX is going to do for me, which we are going to see in just a second. And right now you're still listening to the new camera with the digital AVX system. And as you can see, it gives me a nice strong signal here. So far I'm liking the system, although I think I'm going to tweak the settings a little bit, try the different microphone sensitivities levels, which you can also change here. Right now I think it's on level 2 medium sensitivity. And why don't I just switch over once more to the old system? I'm just gonna hit stop the recording, and then we're gonna switch from this sound to my other old system. Right now I stopped the recording, and you're listening to the old Saramonic analog system again. And let me quickly show you once more the sound recording levels, which you obviously, I told you just a second ago, this has really nice, the new system has really nice, strong signals. With the old Saramonic system, I had to go in here and turn it, yeah, I mean, a considerable amount higher. I think I had to go until somewhere here where the newer system already is peaking. So I can dial the sensitivity down on the camera, which is a huge advantage. So right now you're listening to the old system, and this concludes the test for the Sennheiser AVX versus the old analog system. Terrific, this concludes my initial test of the Sennheiser AVX system. As you can see, we have a day later. I listened to the footage that I recorded yesterday, and so far it looks really promising. Obviously it's always dial in your personal settings. In my case, the room is a little bit echoey. So what I tried right now in the last part, in this part 4, I dialed down the sensitivity of the AVX system to the lowest possible settings and instead increase the sensitivity on the camera input. That way I'm working with a microphone that's less sensitive, that's a little bit more closed down, and my hope is I'm picking up less sound from the room so that it's more pleasant for my viewers that like to watch the content with headphones instead of the speakers. Like I initially told you, that was a little thing that confused me a little bit with the old analog system, that when I was playing back the recorded footage on my computer speakers, it sounded perfectly fine, or when I played it back on the TV, it sounded perfectly fine. But each and every time I put on the headphones with the old analog system, I would hear some echoiness from the room. So that should be improved right now with the AVX system. So I encourage you to play around with the settings a little bit and also consider that the microphone input of your camera also makes an impact on the sound. It's always a multitude of things. It's in which environment are you, how sensitive have you put the mic. Obviously you can connect different microphones to the AVX system. As I told you earlier, there are different sets, not only the analog, the digital, but within the digital you have different microphone variations. More budget-friendly one, which is already pretty expensive, and then a really expensive one, which they, I think, often use also in TV, television productions. So without further ado, this concludes the initial test. You have learned something new. I have a lot of other useful videos on my channel, which I'm going to show to you here. On my channel page in the playlist Audio Equipment, you can find a bunch of other reviews, such as USB audio interfaces, other microphones, XLR microphones, wide other lav mics, as well as some digital to analog converters, for example, for your Apple TV and stuff like that to improve the sound. A lot of people have already subscribed. You can subscribe right now as well. Awesome for tuning in. I see you in the next video. Take care.
Awesome, because you just watched this review, you might also be interested in comparing it against some other interesting audio gear, such as this DuckMagic 100, which I tested with my computer and with the Apple TV. Really nice digital to analog converter, interesting piece of gear, a little bit more unusual than the normal USB audio interfaces. That's why I think this could be interesting for you. And you will always find this on my channel page in the playlist Audio Equipment. I see you in the next video. Take care.